Gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Savage with Mercy. I'm Landon Wietrich. You're about to hear a conversation that I had with my good friend Nolan Schmidgall. Nolan just recently graduated from Iowa State. Now, I've had a lot of episodes recently surrounding marriage and family, and I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk to the young man who's maybe already in college or about ready to leave for college. Now, it's been 10 years or more since I've been to college, and I wanted to bring Nolan on to really provide that fresh perspective of what life is like on a college campus, and then what's the mindset of young adults today? What are they valuing? What do they believe in? What are their convictions? Nolan had the opportunity, or maybe I should say that he made the effort to converse with a lot of individuals on campus that had opposing viewpoints from him. And as you're going to find here in this conversation, he was able to really see where they're coming from, what their perspective is. And so he shares all that with us today. And then lastly, he'll wrap up this episode with a message of encouragement for the young man who's about ready to leave home for the first time and really step into an environment where his convictions may be challenged, what he's grown up with, that'll all be challenged, and where he has to really make a decision of who he is and what he believes in. So I know you guys are going to enjoy this. Before we hop into this, I just want to remind everybody, wherever you are watching or listening to this episode, please make sure you are following or subscribed. And please make sure you're following on our Instagram page at Savage with Mercy. I recently posted a picture of me shooting my AR-15. And immediately afterwards, I got a message from Instagram saying that, in so many words, I was now going to be shadow banned unless I removed that particular photo because it contained a weapon. So I'm not really one to comply with freedom haters, and so I did leave the photo up there. So you might not be able to find Savage with Mercy if you search for it, but if you go to my personal Instagram page at Landon Wietrich, there is the handle is there in my bio of my personal page, so you can find the Savage with Mercy page in the bio of my personal page. So with all that, thank you guys for tuning in. Let's hop right into this episode.
I like your shirt, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's I don't know if there's a better 4-word phrase that kind of describes how I envision myself better than what it says. So.
Yeah, so it says awake but not woke.
Yeah, I guess I can explain what that means to me. It's
sure, yeah,
and kind of how or why it motivates me or why I see this important. But to me, it means awake but not woke is you're aware of the real issues in the world and like the real oppressions and the real problems, but you're not woke in the sense of like being a Marxist or critical theory or critical theorist or leftist or stuff like that, because they claim to be aware of the oppressions. Like a definition or kind of the meaning of woke is you're woke, so it's you're awake to the oppressions that are happening in this world. It's like men oppressing women, whites oppressing blacks, rich oppressing poor, stuff like that. So that like kind of those groups that we were talking about a little earlier. That's their view of society. But awake is like aware of the real problems and the real solutions, as opposed to the Marxist ones that the woke.
You're focused on reality versus a fairy tale.
Yeah, I that's one way to put it. Yeah.
But in all seriousness, as far as like the Marxists and the woke narrative, the woke agenda, they're claiming to be aware of, like you said, the oppression. And going back to that's why I was saying before, how I never want to, while I do think that men are demonized and they've been dealt a rough hand, I never want to come across as the victim, because that's exactly what the woke agenda is all about. It's victimizing certain groups and demonizing other groups. And for whatever reason, they feel that that they have the authority to basically create these categories and draw these lines. Well, you're oppressed, and you're the oppressor. You're the victim, and you're the one that's, abusing your authority. And I don't know. I have no idea what makes them think that they have the authority to make that distinction. It's Yeah, a victim mentality can make people do very outlandish things. It's shocking.
Yeah, I guess another thing maybe I'd like to say is maybe a distinction to make is like I see myself more opposing just more of the movement as opposed to individuals.
I like that.
Yeah. Because I don't, this is one perspective I like to have is I try not to judge individuals too harshly because, I don't know what experiences they've had before this. And if I were in their shoes, I mean, it's very well maybe doing the exact same things. So the way maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but kind of the way I approached some of the conversations that I've had on campus and just in general with people I disagree with is try to meet at the same point. So like there's things that I know that they don't know and there's things that they know and I don't know. So, and that's the reason why we come to different conclusions on things. So if we can like share this information and then kind of all know the same things, we'll be more of a level playing field to kind of move forward. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I approach the conversations that can be more controversial. So instead of just like attacking this person, try to work through the issues together.
They can be difficult though if they're not willing to listen.
Yeah, it has to be a two-way effort for sure.
And that goes, I mean, I'm speaking to myself when I say that too, because that goes for all of us. We have to be willing to listen and at least consider the other perspective. So just for those listening, and just a refresher for myself. So you just graduated from Iowa State. You were there for 4 years, and you said you majored in what type of engineering?
Oh, I was there for 3 years actually.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did mechanical engineering.
Mechanical engineering.
Major.
Okay.
Yep.
And so you just graduated, and so now you kind of have like it's all fresh in your mind as far as the whole college experience and that culture. And I was in college, but that was 10 years ago, and I would imagine, I know, like the college culture and experience, maybe in some ways is probably maybe always going to be somewhat similar, but in other ways it's going to be very, very different. Like 10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Like our country, our society has changed so much in 10 years. No, I know like what you said is Iowa State is probably a little more on the conservative end, and like you being like on the engineering side of things, there maybe was some things that you were less exposed to, but at the same time, just from the conversations that you and I have had, I think you did a good job getting around, and I think you're good at starting conversations and having real discussions, going a little deeper than just the shallow stuff.
Yeah.
You've talked about approaching different tables at different events or
clubs
whatever.
and organizations that are on campus.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit, like just some of those conversations that you have, if there's any like notable that come to mind?
Okay. Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to say is, it's not that I have or I don't want to give any more authority to myself than what I have. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the former child meme.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's like the TV interview, and its title is Former Child. So, like me, it's like I'm just a former college student. That's about all the authority I have. But I did try to pay attention to what was going on there. And I think, for one, ultimately, because I'm a Christian and, the Bible commands us to, care for others, love your neighbor as yourself, and feed the hungry. And
that's why you said earlier you go back to the individual.
Yeah,
I really think it's a good perspective to have. Yeah.
So that was kind of my motivation to pay attention. I could have just tried to get out of there as fast as I could, but it's like, I care, so I try to make the most of what I have in the present. And yeah, so back to with that background and go to the conversation. So I think the ones that I've had were, like, I've talked to people from the Marxist Club. That was the first one that I did. That's kind of the first the first conversation like that I had.
Is that a big club?
I don't think it's real big.
Okay.
Yeah, they just exist. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do they do?
I don't. I think they just meet and then talk about Marxism.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like the kids who I was talking to said they were at some protest in Des Moines a few weeks earlier, so they get involved in some protests and stuff. But they had quite a bit of information on their, or handouts on their table, so they get funding from somewhere.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like a national deal or if there's an Iowa State independent thing.
What do they do with their funding? Buy weed?
They had like the pamphlets and flyers and stuff, or for like information about Marxism.
So that's what their funding is for, to get like.
Well, I think that reflects that they got funding from somewhere.
Okay,
So they're not
okay.
just sitting there with nothing. So they had material, so that reflects they get funding from somewhere.
Sure, yeah.
And I like I said,
That's a very
never looked into where. But.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's somebody's donating somewhere.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's some kind of. I wonder if you have to be like affiliated to some kind of Marxist like national club or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not, and it could be, or it might not be. I never really thought to look into that. But
so yeah, what did do you remember some of the questions that you asked them when you went up to their you went up to their table, right?
Yeah, yep. So that was I think the spring of 2021. So it was a little while ago, but I think the things that stuck out most to me is, well, I first asked kind of like, what is Marxism and the difference between communism and stuff, and I kind of forget what they said specifically, but as we were going through the conversation, the guy was explaining to me that their general outlook on things was that they thought that the time for capitalism around the world has expired, and so it's time to move on to socialism. It's just like the world moved from, or just the West moved from feudalism to capitalism. Now it's time for the West to move from capitalism to socialism, and that will create essentially a utopia where everything's distributed fairly and everybody's happy, and
so that's their goal.
Free. Yeah,
this utopia.
Yeah, essentially. Okay. And it seems like, I'm sure they had noble intentions, but I guess I just disagree with their solution to the problems that they see. And one thing, the way they thought the government should be run is like completely tear down everything, because it's like all the institutions that we have, because it's irredeemable. It's too far corrupt to fix. And I guess that's part of the Marxist idea, is to revolt against the current system and kind of just burn everything down and start again. But the way they wanted it, what they wanted to replace it with was kind of a co-governing body between labor unions and then a governmental authority. So he put a lot of emphasis on like labor unions kind of governing with some government body, and there's obviously no chance that could ever go wrong. But so I asked him, like, well, what about all the times that all the countries that socialism has gone wrong and lots of people died, and there's like Soviet Union, China, Venezuela. It's like, well, and he said, well, they all did it wrong, and they could find all their problems, and and that may be the case, but I mean, I thought later, it's like, well, no matter what system you have in place, like whatever system of man you have in place, it's like it can fail.
That's what I don't. Sorry to cut you off.
I was kind of going on a little bit.
No, you're fine. That's what I don't understand is
what makes them think that we're so much wiser that we're not going to feel just like those other countries?
Yeah, I don't know if I can speak for them like that.
Sorry, I shouldn't. We need to bring one of them here.
That's right. Have a
And
Marxist club representative on next.
and it's like they're looking for this utopia, and I really feel like that's
Well, it's more so. It almost seemed to me they're looking for a form of salvation from like they see the problems in this world. Like I was talking to the guy, and it kind of seemed to me that we would agree probably on a lot of like what's actually going wrong in the world. Like, and
I mean, like there's tons of corruption and
yeah,
like,
and even more so than like people that or like my friends and family that I'm close to. Like this guy probably knew more about what's actually going on than a lot of people who I use regularly or who would identify as conservatives who I'm regularly around. So that like there's that there, but then their solution is to to implement this utopian idea like we just talked about. So it's like they see the problems and they're looking for a form of salvation, and then they see, oh, this utopia sounds nice, so we're going to turn to that, which was going to be a point I brought up and then maybe come up later, but right now I'd say it's pretty evident that just young people are searching right now for a purpose, and I think the college campus provides provides many different options to fulfill that with, or attempt to fulfill that with.
Sure. Yeah. The fact that there's all these different tables and stuff that you can stop at, they're all saying, "Hey, we have the answers.
Yeah.
We have the solution."
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where the anti-gun movement ties in as well, because it's like, well, if there are no guns, things will automatically be more peaceful. It's like that doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I think they focus more on the external system, or like to me, one thing like this external system of socialism will save us all, but I think for me, as a Christian, I think more of the biblical approach is to look at things from the internal,
looking
more
at the
from
heart.
an internal perspective. Yeah, and looking more to reform instead of revolt and tear down.
Yeah,
that's one
reform. Okay, yeah. That's both lead to change, but it's two very different ways of going about it.
Yeah, that's one takeaway that I had, and yeah.
You made me think of a quote I quote Jordan Peterson in almost every episode, but
I was going to do that at some point myself. So, yeah.
He said something along the lines, and I'm not going to say it word for word, but it was something along the lines of, if there truly was a world where everything was perfect and there was really no conflict, people would begin to intentionally mess things up and just smash things because that's what creates, just in order to get some kind of excitement or adventure.
Yeah.
If there's no conflict, if there's no consequences, if there's no risk, you end up with a boring world. And that's what they don't realize. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I might do an episode on it in the future. But Jordan Peterson talks about order and chaos and how you need both. Because while order is absolutely necessary, it can be very boring. And it can suck the creativity in life. Well, it can suck the creativity and the adventure and excitement out of life. Whereas if you have too much chaos, it can lead to anarchy. And then there's no beauty. And like the point is, there's no order here. So you have to have that balance of order and chaos. And when you find that appropriate balance, that's where the beauty is. That's where the life is. Because risk and challenge and resistance, that's where the beauty of discovery is, the beauty of overcoming, the beauty of achievement.
Yeah.
And if everything is a utopia, everything is easy, everything is fair, it's boring. We're all so equal that we all know what you're going through. You know what I have. You know what I have. It's all the same. If we race, everybody wins. Like, how boring is that? Like, what would be? Yeah. So that might be a conversation for another time. But I loved what he said. He's like, people will eventually intentionally wreck things out of it because they get so bored, because they want something to put back together. And I really feel like that's what, like, it's inside of every man. We're fixers. We're problem solvers. If there's no problems, we don't have a purpose. If there's no challenge, we don't really feel the need to be around. We're conquerors, problem solvers. But
yeah, well, I don't think there's ever going to be any shortage of chaos in this world, so
I agree. Yeah. I agree, and that's why, like, I go back to, it's not reality. What they're rooting for, what their goal is, it's not reality. It's not. I guess I disagree with the whole utopia idea, because I think it's going to be, even if you could achieve it, which you're not going to, even if you could achieve it, it's boring. So it's unrealistic, and it would be very boring. It would not be a life that they would truly enjoy. But then also, it's as long as there are humans out there with egos and with agendas and with pride, that's never going to exist. I don't care how empathetic and selfless you think you are, you have an agenda, and there's going to be people that you don't like and things that you don't like, and yeah, it's just not realistic.
Yeah. And then I guess the other organizations are kind
Hold
of
on, real quick. Wasn't
right.
BLM is a Marxist group, right? Or or maybe there's the founders were
the founders
Marxists.
are self-acclaimed Marxists,
Yeah.
if I understand things right. Which the ideas that they operate with are kind of the critical race theory, so critical theory applied to race. And so yeah, all white people oppress all black people. So I think that's kind of their general philosophy. But I guess I never really experienced this BLM specifically on campus, like the group. I don't recall ever seeing anything from them. Which I like. I mean, that's just, I just don't recall. So maybe I did and don't remember. But yeah,
it may just mean they didn't have as much influence there on campus. Maybe
could be. Yeah.
But yeah. What were some of the other tables?
Yeah. So then I think the next one I went to was that they have an atheist club. I think it's like agnostic and atheist club. So yeah, they had a table out there too. So
have you heard? You know who Tim Hawkins is, right? The Christian comedian.
Yeah.
Have you heard him talk about the atheist, like the atheist summer camp and the songs they sing?
The children's songs. Yeah, I've heard those. Those are pretty good.
I started laughing when you said like the atheist clubs. That just made me think of those songs.
Yeah.
No one loves the little children.
Yeah.
And he spells it for, instead of the IMSE, he spells out atheist.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I've seen that video before. And then there's, I don't know what the group is called. I guess some climate awareness club, maybe.
Oh yeah,
I think that's what they're called. So they were doing a demonstration in front of one of the buildings one day. So, or they did it like once a week. So one day I went up and I had a few. I wanted to talk to them. So with the similar motivation as what I had the other places. Yeah. So I had a conversation with them, and then I talked to 2 LGBTQ IA plus affirming pastors. Also, and there was I think that was all for like organizational things, and then my other experiences would just be like with different individuals, like friends, and I think most of the people I spent some amount, like a somewhat substantial amount of time with, I would consider my friend there. But
Your friend where?
at college.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
so
okay.
if like I say a friend, it's someone who I was with maybe multiple times throughout
Sure.
my time there.
Did you develop any like relationships or friendships with people in these groups that you just did not agree with, but for whatever reason you got along well with them?
Yeah, I would say so.
And like where you either hung out with them or at least kind of crossed paths with them multiple times, and could maybe have like a respectful or a relationship of mutual respect where you could have like just like a normal conversation without it being like controversial or anything like that.
Oh, yeah, there were a few cases that some were just like that one instance at the table.
Sure.
And then, never see each other again.
Yeah.
But there was like, a couple times with those two pastors. Actually, I mean, the one I saw multiple times, and with a friendly interaction. She actually, I wrote my testimony about how I came to Christ and kind of, and the
And you gave it
things
to her?
that happened after that. Yeah, I gave it to her, and she's one of the few people who's read it. But so
very
she was willing to read it and had a respectful response. So I guess I should say all of the conversations I had ended in good graces. Like we were all ended on friendly terms and
Good.
handshakes and hugs and fist bumps.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So they did end well, and
Well, I think that happens more than people want to admit.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us are afraid to put ourselves in those scenarios and actually have those conversations. But I think if we would more often, we'd experience what you have. And that, again, it goes back to, I think, what you said earlier as far as looking at the individual, looking at their heart. And I think people truly sense that. People can really sense when you care about them as an individual, when you see them as an individual.
One of the bigger realizations or revelations that I had is when I started to like interact with these people who, like the conservatives would consider like more people, but me and you are around more. We consider them these crazed liberals and stuff, and these crazy people are just kind of off the wall and don't really deserve to. I wouldn't that'd be a little harsh. Like, don't really deserve to exist, but we kind of rather them maybe just go off.
It could sound
corner.
like that.
Yeah.
So based on like the way we refer to them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but then when I was around these people more, I could see, I could see that the care that they had for just the well-being of others in the world. So they were doing what they thought was best to help people around them. And I could see like the genuine effort just in like these individuals themselves.
And how could you not appreciate that?
Right.
How can you
Which
not respect
yeah,
that?
for sure. Which I do, and I did at the time, and I do now. So I saw the problem to be, and this is from my perspective, that so these people, and it goes back a little to what I said earlier, these people are genuine. They see problems in the world, and they're genuinely searching for answers and a solution. So then, they turn to what's being offered. Marxism, climate change, LGBTQ community, pretty much you name it. Like, I mean, even not like sex, drugs, alcohol, relationships. All these things, like everybody's searching for something, and that they're everyone needs salvation, right? And so they're just trying to find it in these strange groups that will actually make things end up worse than what things would be if they didn't exist at all. So that's one thing that was pretty impactful for me.
Just based off of what you've witnessed, and feel free to take this conversation wherever you want to go with it, but
Okay.
Based off of just your experience, you said you were there for 3 years, and the different conversations that you have, and some of this we've already kind of gotten into as far as what are individuals looking for. But let's kind of talk about the men a little bit, the young men that you witnessed, interacted with, and so forth.
Sure. Yeah.
We've already kind of said that they're looking for answers. They're looking for salvation. Do you feel like, let's talk about like marriage and family for a minute, based off of your experience with them? Did marriage seem to be something that they would have valued, and like having kids, or was that nowhere near their mind? I feel like more and more marriage is seen as something that you do in your 30s nowadays, whereas back 20 years ago it was something that you did in your maybe not in that long, like 10 or 15 years ago it was something that you did in your 20s for sure. Like now it's like you get married and have kids in your 30s. What seemed to be the general attitude towards that with the men that you interacted with?
Yeah. So since that was kind of on the list that you sent to me,
Yeah.
I was thinking about it some before. So it was kind of surprised with what I experienced, or days more. Wasn't really expecting it. So I'd say just I felt that people generally regarded like a relationship, like men generally regarded a relationship with a girl, with a long-term sense, as a good thing. And that actually I had multiple classmates that were married. They're a little older students as opposed to just out of high school and stuff. But there was one class I had, there was 16 people in it. I think there were two who were either engaged. I think there were two that were engaged at the time in that class, and just out of 16 people, which is not very much.
Yeah.
And I had one group where the guy was married, so it seemed like there was a pretty high regard for marriage and I would say like dating also. But of course, that's the good part. The not so good part is like how they go about, or what kind of things they do while dating, or whether it's intimacy outside of marriage or living together. There was, a lot of that. Like pretty much, it's a majority of relationships were probably like that. So I think it seems like my response is maybe a little jumbled than what I maybe had
You're okay.
prepared in my head. But it's like, yeah, so to answer your question, it seemed like marriage and long-term
At least
relationship,
long-term.
yeah, we're viewed as good things, and sought after. See, like a lot of my friends had girlfriends, and now like I said, what they did with them maybe wasn't always what we.
But it wasn't
we would
just
but
it wasn't just casual. It was more serious,
right,
more
right, I would say.
exclusive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty serious. And I had friends who weren't dating and who were wanting to be. Yeah. So that was, a small flare of encouragement is, I think there's still some respect for marriage, and
that's where
like early also, or as not like as soon as you can, but fairly early.
Yeah.
Also. So
one of the things that I asked you before we started this was just kind of like, how can we encourage or support young men that are in college or getting ready to go into college. Yeah, what's kind of your message to them?
Yeah, kind of. So I'll start with the support first. I think accountability is a big thing. I guess this would probably be more of like a Christian or religious concept. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You're okay.
Christian or religious concept is accountability, but just checking in with, like, if you're older.
It doesn't have to be though.
Right.
It doesn't have to be like a religious.
Right. You know what? Yeah, that might be a little too presumptuous to say that, but if you're like an older individual who maybe a relative or friend of a college student, I think just reaching out to them from time to time, asking how they're doing, and keeping up a relationship with them, I think is good. Because I think that ties into people searching for stuff, people looking for belonging and meaning, and looking to be seen as a human being.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. And also, like my parents made a pretty big effort to come and visit me when I was up there, and that was good. That was to kind of get some familiarity in there, or it just within, like, you go to college, it's all new, but then your parents come, it's nice to see them.
Especially if your parents taught you a lot growing up and really kind of set some standards. I would imagine when you go to college, like when I went to college, I still lived at home with my parents, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I would imagine if you went away, you're for the first time really separated from all those standards that you were taught. And like you said, now you're getting all these different options, all these different viewpoints and everything like that. So like would what you're saying is, like, as a parent, to kind of maybe keep those standards alive and in their life, keep that relationship alive, and like you said, visit them and place yourself in their environment, just so they don't completely forget where they came from and what you valued in your home, what you taught them when they were in your home.
Yeah. Because one thing I noticed is it's not that you're isolated up at college, because there's lots of people around, but it's a lot easier to isolate yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you have more of a tendency to do that, well, if it goes too far, obviously that can be dangerous. But if you have, if you're a person who have a tendency to do that, if you have someone reaching out to you from time to time, I think that can really, really help.
And especially if it's, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so stop me if you disagree, but like, I would also imagine if it's somebody that someone more experienced, someone more mature, older, whatever you want to say, that is more established in their convictions, and maybe if you're in a place to where you're trying to find your convictions or develop your convictions, having that relationship or that point of contact, someone that you can kind of look to as a mentor, or at least kind of run things by them, like, hey, what do you think about this, and what did you do when you encountered this, or whatever. And I would imagine that could go a long way.
Yeah. And
so really, sorry, really, you're kind of speaking to both parties here. Is that, like, if you are an older individual and you have and you're acquainted with a young man who's going to college, take that first step and let him know, hey, like, I'm here if you need anything. Reach out to them from time to time, but then also for the young man going to college to be willing to make a connection with someone who's older and really have someone
definitely.
So it takes both of them, as kind of like what you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Both sides need to be willing to be involved and be willing to share and be open with one another.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to say about support, and this would be more for the capital C churches. We talked about all these options that college provide, and you even brought up that the kids are kind of searching for what they personally believe, and you said, like, well, you could say, well, if they were taught what's right at home, well, it seems to me that, from my observation, that just the church in general isn't really doing a great job of teaching or teaching their members or their kids of what they believe and why they should believe it, because the problem is these issues are controversial, so you start to get into them, it's uncomfortable, so then it's easier to stay away. But if you do that, that leaves people searching for the answers to the real questions in life.
Yeah.
So, I think a commitment to teaching and learning and growing in the truth in all matters, like doctrinal or political or theological or anything, like any hot button topic there is, I think it's important to try to search for the truth in that matter, and then teach, raise your kids in that. So if there's like one thing to remember from this podcast, it would be that it's like a commitment to the truth, and that's I think I can go a long ways. Because if that doesn't happen, as from the same talk that my dad gave, if you remember the quote, it's like, it's easier to raise strong children than fix broken men.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And you're really doing a disservice. You're doing a disservice to young men, and really everybody, but we're talking to young men here, but you're doing a disservice to them if you're not equipping them with awareness of what's out there, and then also in how to respond to it. And I've talked to your dad about this before, and that I feel the church has failed young men. And we were talking about that message from Jordan Peterson to the Christian church, before we started recording, and I wholeheartedly agreed with that. And just because I truly feel, for whatever reason, again, we're talking about the capital C church here, it's like, if it's not directly impacting what they're doing in church, we're not really going to get involved. But it's like, what if you're truly going to minister and pastor these young men who are going to go out into the world and become leaders in their home, leaders in the community, there is really nothing outside of, there's really nothing out of bounds, like, that you can't speak on, that you can't speak to. Every topic should be discussed in church, I feel. And like I said, it's all about equipping them with knowledge, equipping them with awareness, and then how does the truth fit into that, or how can you respond with truth to this issue? And but like you said, since these are hot button topics, it's like, oh, we'll save that for some other place other than the church. And with the fact of the matter is like, well, what if this child's parents aren't doing their job and equipping them at home? Where else are they going to hear these things?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like that's something else that we could really unpack as well. But yeah, I wish the church would be a little more bold in addressing these hot button topics, and so that they don't have to go. Well, so let me put it this way. I've heard, I talk about Jordan Peterson all the time and how much I appreciate him, but multiple other Christians have come up and been like, but Landon, he's not a Christian. I'm like, yeah, it's sad that I have to go to a non-Christian to get this information.
Right.
I should be able to get this from the church.
Yeah.
But the church is failing young men and failing us as far as equipping us with this knowledge and helping us know how to respond to this. So we have to go to someone like Jordan Peterson, who's actually willing to talk about these things.
Yeah, or some Christian doing the same, like some Christian doing the same thing as Jordan Peterson is, having these, genuine, or even Joe Rogan having these genuine conversations with people. But instead, since, the church left that void, or that vacuum, it's going to be filled by something. And I think we're lucky it's filled by Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan for right now. It could be a lot worse.
Exactly. It's like, until you really bring me somebody, whether it's a pastor or a scholar or whatever, a theologian, that will also address these issues, and is not really afraid of getting backlash or canceled, whatever. It's like we're gonna have to go to Jordan Peterson and the Joe Rogans or whatever, who are willing to maybe it's not necessarily Joe Rogan specifically, but at least he's bringing the conversations to his show. Because he's brought a lot of people on his show that I've learned from. Just about life in general. But anything else?
Let's see. I said what I want to do there. I guess a couple points. One thing, it's kind of more of a comical statement, but kind of maybe reflects some of the backdrop at Iowa State. I was talking to, or one of my friends, I'd say he's a strong Christian, and he's from Chicago. So we were eating lunch together one day, and he's like, to me, Ames seems like a conservative town. And to me, it's like it's one of the most liberal towns in Iowa. So it's like he comes from Chicago, seems Ames conservative, and I come from rural southeast Iowa. See Ames as perspective. way farther than from what I grew up in. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I probably should have said that a little earlier, but that's I think it provides some perspective. But
It does.
yeah, and then so the other things, the stuff that I had written down that I thought was important and didn't want to forget.
Oh, yeah.
I think is different. I think points. I mean, I call them philosophies or points of worldview that really helped me in my outlook of life, because we talked about it. People say, oh, we can't control it, and then they become afraid to kind of approach these issues. But these are things that not my ideas. I was told. One was from a personal friend. Other was I heard it on a podcast. But the first one is that really impacted me is, everyone makes a difference in this world, but due to the decisions that they do or don't make. So it's like everyone changes the world, by the decisions that they do or don't make.
So that's why you shouldn't say like my vote doesn't count or what.
Or even
just
impact your interactions with different people and in just any decision for that matter. And then the one that kind of piggybacks off that is like each time you choose to follow what's good and right, the course of the universe is changed. And I firmly believe those, and that's that's core to a lot of the things that I do. Because like it may seem small, but ultimately, it's making an impact for what's right, and you never know how you're going to impact someone's life. Like I know a college professor who he stopped a big school shooting and didn't know it at the time, but this kid called him later and said, yeah, I prepared for it. I bought all the ammunition and the guns, and because of my interaction with you, I decided not to do it.
Oh, so, my goodness.
And it's a story he tells, and that's you just never know how you're going to impact someone's life. And then kind of the last, just more of a general statement, is just work to establish a reality-based biblical worldview. I think that's important because a lot of times these disagreements that we have and differences that we have, a lot of it is due to just how we view the world and what we think is right and wrong. Since we have different concepts of that, that's why we disagree. So, it's just focusing on how you view the world makes sure, it's reality-based, and we think biblically is the best way also, but
and people have different ideas of what reality is.
there's that too, but I mean
And the sad thing is, I think a lot of people that are the most critical of the Bible, they're the least familiar with it. I don't. That's not the case. There are some people that are very familiar with it, and they still don't.
Right.
They're still not on board with it, and it is what it is. But I feel like that's oftentimes the case. Is if and I've said before, a lot of the things that are a lot of self-help people, a lot of the advice and counsel they give, you find it in Scripture. And I don't know if they know that or not, but it's like, hey, did you realize that this this is also taught in Scripture as well? Why? Because there's actual value there in helping a person's, bringing them joy and all that sort of things like forgiveness, and the golden rule of treating others as you want to be treated. But it's like this stuff just wasn't made up. There's a purpose behind it all.
It turns out the best way to live life is found in the Bible and the way Jesus lived and taught. It's what makes the book so powerful, or it's one of the things that makes the book so powerful. And I guess you bring up that point. I talk to some agnostics, and you can always listen to atheists on YouTube and stuff. But one thing that they never really seem to fully understand the true meaning of the Bible. Like they critique it, but a lot of times it's taken out of different passages taken out of context, and they twist it to mean some terrible thing, and they don't read the full story and stuff like that. So also if you're genuinely wanting to know what's true, I'd say, yeah, search out what the Bible truly says, and then make a judgment based off of that. What you find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that's all I had. Now I'm the one leaning back from the mic. I think that's all I had.
All right.
Did you have anything else?
Well, I think I covered. Let's see, most of what came to my mind of the question. So, yeah.
What do you think the conclusion of this conversation is? Like, it's from what you're telling me. I'm really kind of grateful to hear this. It sounds like college life and what young men in particular are looking for hasn't changed a whole lot. There's still a lot of searching for answers. There's still a lot of questions and everything. So in many ways that is encouraging, and that's what we kind of was said earlier. Like from the beginning of time, people have been pursuing answers. They've been pursuing, solutions to the problems that they see in the world. One of the takeaways I have that I appreciate you bringing up is each of these different groups or whatever, they are genuinely wanting to solve some problem. They genuinely believe this is a problem and they want to help it. And I think that's a good perspective when we do see these groups like like you believe in global warming and all this sort of thing, and it's easy to just kind of write them off as like, they're not on board with reality. They don't know what's going on. Yeah. But like what you're saying is have that perspective of, they truly believe in this. They truly believe that that they're doing some good.
Right.
They just want to do
what's right.
Yeah. And that's what you have to bear in mind, and maybe find some common ground in that we all see a problem when we're trying to fix it, and try to empathize with that. And then it was something that I've been trying to do when I talk to people that I disagree with is, it's sometimes it can be hard to find common ground, but express to them, hey, I recognize that you see this as a problem, and that you care about this, and I respect that, but then also recognize that this is what I value, this is what I'm trying to defend, and if you can at least kind of find common ground there, and as far as like how you're both identifying a problem that you want a solution for, then that helps at least, again, going back to seeing that person as a person and them seeing you as a person versus an enemy or someone on the other side, whatever, or just someone with an agenda and whatever. So yeah, but thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. I guess for the conclusion, you said like, what should the conclusion be?
Yeah,
I think
I should have asked you. I should have kept my mouth shut.
I see, a lot of hope and a lot of opportunity, because you said these people are genuinely, well, we all are, genuinely searching for something. So there's a lot of hope that people are still want to do that's right, and there's a lot of opportunity for the church to stand up for the truth and provide answers to these questions that everybody has, like where we came from, who we are, and where are we going. So if the church sees this opportunity and stands up in this role, I think a lot of good things can happen. But if they don't and continue down the path that it seems like they have been going in the past and just kind of avoid these issues, things will just get worse. And it seems to be, the church is probably, the one to blame for not keeping the doors of the culture.
Well, and I think sometimes maybe we've all been guilty of this one time or another, but I fear the church has been like, oh, they're too far gone. Like it's a lost cause. And like the next generation, it's like a lost cause or whatever. Like they're never going to believe the truth. But what you're saying is like, no. There is an opportunity here. Yeah. And don't give up on them. Right. Is what you're saying. Right. I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming on. And,
thanks for having me.
Of course, I really appreciate what you shared and providing this perspective, and it can be very easy just as we go through life to become really out of touch with the younger generations, and even with the generation other than yours,
Right,
you can
right.
become out of touch with what they're going through. And if we truly want to work together to reach any goal, it really begins with awareness of other perspectives and the challenges that others are facing. And in this podcast, we're focused more on men. So it's like, what are these men going through? What's their perspective on life? What are their fears? What are they really looking for? What do they need? And it's there's definitely going to be a lot of that's the same regardless of the generation, but there could be some different things too, based off of whatever they're seeing in pop culture and what's accepted and what's not accepted. And like I said, I really at the beginning of this podcast, I don't know if that'll make it into the final edit or not, but I was just saying how I really feel like a lot of men do feel that they're the problem, and so it's very tempting just to be far more hands off. And it's like that's just going to create far more problems. And I really want to remind men that you do have what it takes. You are needed, and you can get it done, whatever it is.
Right.
Like you can be the solution.
Yeah. And I think another point of hope too is something I noticed is there's with the people I was with, granted it's generally more like the Midwest type of crowd, but there was just a general just rejection or just not really having much of a acceptance for like the wokeism that we see. Like for them it's not how they grew up, so it's almost like an attack on the way they were raised, and the things that it demands are a little strange sometimes. So it's like these people they don't always want it, but they don't know where to go.
It's like what you're saying. It could has something to do with them being born and raised in the Midwest, but I really think the majority of people are not on board with it.
Yeah.
It's either like you said, they don't really know what to say, so they just kind of stay out of it, or they do know what's going on and they're strongly against it. But that's been my experience as well. It's just the majority of people. It's like they might not necessarily like speak out against it, but they're at the same time like, yeah, I'm not on board with it. That's just weird. But the sad thing is these are the things that make it into the headlines and make it in the news.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So it sounds like more people are for it than they really are.
Right.
So, and that's something for all of us to keep in mind. But the problem is like, will that? I am fearing that the next generations are being desensitized to just some of the blatant evil and wrong in it all. Because I think our generation or there's like 10 years between you and I. So it's like my generation and your generation, I still feel like there's enough awareness there to realize this doesn't make sense. This doesn't add up. This is wrong. Yeah. But I'm not saying it's always going to be that way.
Right.
Like,
which that's what the movement wants, which I mean,
exactly.
I believe is ultimately driven by the devil, but
yeah,
I mean, that's their goal.
Yeah. Well, we better wrap this before it turns into 3 hours.
Yeah.
Thanks again, man. I appreciate you coming on, and you're always welcome back. Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. I hope you all enjoyed that conversation. I want to give a special thank you to Nolan for coming on the show and reminding us the value of having those uncomfortable conversations with those that we know good and well have opposing viewpoints from ours. This is something that I'm not very good at personally, but this is an opportunity to not only share what we believe to be true, but even more importantly, to listen, to hear someone else out, and to learn a perspective different from our own. So, Nolan, thank you for reminding us of that. Of course, I want to remind everyone to follow and subscribe wherever you are watching or listening to this episode. And then, of course, you can look for us on Instagram at Savage with Mercy. If you can't find us there, as I mentioned when this episode started, you can go to my personal Instagram page at Landon Wietrich, and the Savage with Mercy handle will be in that bio. So that's where you can find our page and follow the Savage with Mercy Instagram page there. So thank you all for joining for this episode of Savage with Mercy. I'll catch you next time.